right. Well, I appreciate everybody coming this morning. What I'm going to do is kind of go over an analysis of the service that we did last year and talk about a few things that came to light in that and some of the things that we might want to do with the service going forward, and just answer some of your questions. So I kind of already told you about this. It's where we're at now and what we're going to try to achieve going forward. Some of our existing rider information and future opportunities. So is everybody here a long-time resident of Murfreesboro, or at least one of you, two of you, most of you? Okay. If you are, then you know that over here, and we're talking mostly in the close proximity to downtown type of area. This is an older area here, older homes. They've been around for a long time, and this is where a lot of city residents are that need to get to jobs that are all over here on this side of town. We're starting to develop some over here, but right now the vast majority of the jobs are in like the retail areas and all this area over here. So the challenge is being able to get these folks from here over to here. They're low to moderate income positions, which means that a lot of these people may not have their own vehicle, or because they're low to moderate income, they just don't have any other source of getting around other than a public service. We carry about 1,000 passenger trips per day on 7 routes, and a lot of those are repeat passengers. So you go out somewhere and then you come back, that's 2 trips, okay? The Highland and Mercury routes, I don't know if you know much about them. I'll get more into where they actually are and all that in a minute. Those are our busiest routes. Mercury probably the busiest, and there's some things that we want to do with that I'll talk about as well. The west side routes, Gateway, Old Fort, and the west side loop, those are our lowest ridership routes. There's some things that we want to do with those as well, but with the growth that's in that area, we anticipate that those will continue to grow and become more productive. So the age range there of 19 to 64 is kind of it's a pretty big range. I mean, say most of the Rover customers are working age of 19 to 64. So really what that's telling us is that there's not a lot of younger students that are riding the buses, and there's not a lot of retirees that are riding the buses. Majority of the household incomes are below $20,000 a year. And as I said earlier, most have no car. They would have to walk if Rover wasn't available. And due to the nature of our service, there's still a pretty good bit of walking that has to be done depending on where you're going. Largest number of trips are for work, followed by shopping and medical. And over 60% of the people surveyed said that they had missed out on employment opportunities because of a lack of transportation. So they either didn't have their own car, or they didn't have anybody that could take them there, or our bus service couldn't get them there. So a lot of our riders use it every single day. Some riders are using it again to go to work. Some are using it just because they enjoy to get out and get around and do something. They typically rate the service pretty high, and I think a lot of that's due to our drivers. We have a pretty good group of drivers, and with very low number of complaints, but they seem to get along with everybody pretty well and kind of learn our passengers and so on, which will become a little bit more difficult as we continue on into the future and the service grows, it's going to be a lot more challenging to try to know everybody on a more personal level than what it is right now. You see that third bullet right there. The most desired change was to have Saturday service. We knew that before the survey was ever conducted. We were working towards having that this fiscal year. Had it planned out, would have started back in July, but there were some things that had to be cut from the budget, and each department had to look at things that that we could cut. Rather than cutting existing service, we just cut out what we had planned to add to the service. So that way we didn't lose anything. We just weren't able to get Saturday in there this year. So we're pushing towards trying to get it next fiscal year, and I sincerely hope we do. Service to new job opportunities. We've talked about a rapid route, or if you will, going to the Butler Drive and Amazon area that just leaves from downtown and goes straight out there to where the factories and industry is to help people that need jobs out there, because we've heard a lot about that. And then students and young workers are underrepresented. So basically they're just saying that we don't have a lot of students and young riders on the service. So right now we go on to campus with our Mercury route. Again, we don't have a whole lot of MTSU students that use that. The main reason I see is because of our hours of service. I mean, we stop at 6 o'clock in the evening, and that's when the young folks want to get out. They want to go to the mall or go to a movie or whatever, and we're not running, so they don't have any way to get there and get back unless they bum a ride with a friend. And I'm sure that's probably what they all do. So we do want to work with MTSU, and we've had some talks with them on getting into campus a little further. They've talked about giving us the opportunity to get in on some of their bus routes and use those roadways. Right now they don't really want us in certain areas out there, and which I completely understand. So we want to work with them and see what else we could do for MTSU. So one of the things I talked about earlier was the West Side Loop being a very low ridership route. I mean, there's days when we're lucky to have 10 people ride that bus. And so we've talked about taking it, and the West Side Loop comes over here and runs down by the Social Security office and then comes back. So what we've talked about doing is combining it with the old Fort route and operating 2 buses on this route. So you would still have the same frequency, but you'd be operating it with 2 buses. This piece over here just isn't used. We don't stop on this road right down through here. It's not really a safe road to be stopping and trying to pick people up anyway, because there's not even hardly a shoulder there. So combining those 2 routes we think would be a good option for us, and that's probably something we're going to try to get done within the next, I'd say, 8 months. So we've also talked about adding a new route over here, like I just said a minute ago, to kind of come through campus and help out these 2 routes, which are our busiest routes. So that would add additional service to the area, and it would also encompass MTSU better for us. And then, as I mentioned a minute ago, the express route that would come out here to the Butler Drive, Amazon area, all of that. So there wouldn't be any stops between downtown and here. It would just be back and forth, just an express route. And it probably is not something that we would run all day long. We would have to work with those companies out there, see what the best times are to run that service back and forth. That's the biggest challenge of it, and operate it in that manner. So when we do Saturday, we're looking at just operating 3 routes. Those 3 routes would be the Highland and the Mercury routes again, which are our busiest routes, and then this Old Fort combination with the West Side Loop and so on over here. Notice we took out the spot over here. That's where the Social Security office is. It's not open on Saturday. That's the only reason anybody goes over into that part anyway. We very rarely pick anybody else up over there except for Social Security office. And let's go here. So right now, as you know, you can be anywhere along one of the routes. Stick your hand up, we'll stop, pick you up. It's a dangerous way to operate, really. It's called a flag stop system. I've worked it in other locations in the country, but it's common for smaller cities to start out their transit system that way. And here in Murfreesboro, 10 years ago, maybe it wasn't quite that risky, if you will, to have a flag stop service, but now we're really busy on our roads, if you haven't noticed, and we need to get away from just pulling over anywhere and have more designated bus stops. And one of the problems that we have is you'll have people on the same route and somebody will wave you down, get on the bus, you'll drive 200 feet and then somebody else will wave you down to get on the bus. So that's a problem, and it just creates more of a hazard. It delays the routes a little bit as opposed to having designated stops that you know you're going to be at. So that's one of the goals we want to try to get to. I don't know when that will happen, but it's on our list, and it'll be a little easier for people to identify where they need to be to get picked up. One of the things you might not realize is that it's not as simple as just going out and putting up a sign and say, here's a bus stop. If we're going to put any kind of shelter there, or if we don't own the property, there's all kinds of special requirements we have to go through before we can designate that as a bus stop. So if we don't own the property, even if it's just as big as these 2 tables put together, we've got to buy it. And because we use a lot of federal money in this service, we have to do specific things that are required by the federal government in order to buy that piece of property. So you're talking about environmental studies and all that just for a little piece of property like this. So, and it just takes an enormous amount of time. So it will be a big project when we get it going, and it'll take a while to switch from a flag stop system to a regular fixed route bus stop system.
And sometimes the stop is put up and then the route changes and the stop is no longer used.
Yeah, so when you designate your route, you want to make sure that it's something that's going to be there for a while.
There's a very nice shelter on the corner of Hazelwood
Right.
and Las Casas, but
Yeah.
not used.
So, and I'll speak to that. So right across the street, there's Woodfin's funeral home, right? And on the side street over there, there's a little corner piece of property that a private citizen owns that wants to donate that to the city. They don't have any use for it. They can't do anything with it, so they said, we'll just donate it to the city. So we're working through that and hoping we'll get that little piece of property. Like, again, it's not much bigger than maybe these 3 tables and this area here put together, but it's enough for us to put a bus stop on, a bus shelter. So, and it would be a better spot, of course, than where that other shelter is, and so what we would do is just move that shelter over to that spot, and then it would become a useful bus stop. So.
On the east side of Las Casas by Woodfin's?
Yeah, it's right beside. So when, right now we turn down Hazelwood, and that bus stop's over here on the wrong side, so we're going this way. So as soon as literally right, just as you passed Woodfin's on the right-hand side, you wouldn't know it. There's just a there's some grass and bushes there. So, yeah, and one of the things that helps with having designated bus stops is reducing the number of pass-bys. Sometimes, we may not see somebody out there, or we may not realize that they're wanting to ride the bus or whatever. They're running up to the bus trying to wave us down. It's situations where we don't want to jam on the brakes really hard and quickly swerve over and pick somebody up, because then you're putting people inside the bus in a bad situation. So here's some of the cost associated with doing some of these things, and these are just roundabout figures, but they're reasonably close. If we implement one new route on the east side, that would cost us about $200,000, and really that's actually low. It's more like $240,000 to just add one route with the existing hours that we have now, Monday through Friday. That cost includes the driver, the fuel cost, everything that goes along with it, the liability cost, insurance, everything. Implementing that industrial route, because that wouldn't be an all-day route running constantly, it wouldn't cost us as much. And then, as you can see, they're talking about estimated additional vehicles. We would need one for that route and one for that route. The type of buses that we operate right now, if I were to go and buy a new one, it's about $140,000. That's about, you're not going to find anything any cheaper that that we need to operate the service as we do right now. And then operating the 3 routes on Saturday, that would only be our manpower that we would have to pay for, and then some additional liability costs, fuel cost, that kind of thing. So again, restructuring Rover's existing routes, changes to the running times and service frequencies, capital such as infrastructure and fleet recommendations, fare policy recommendations, evening and weekend service recommendations. So when we go to later in the evening, which right now it's not on the immediate radar, you're probably looking at going to about 9 o'clock at night. A lot of people say they would like us to go later, but the ridership just won't be there after 9 o'clock at night. Friends in Clarksville that run a transit system up there, when they used to go till 6 o'clock, and then they changed it to 11 o'clock. And after 9 o'clock, they weren't carrying anybody, so they moved it back to 9, and that's when they stopped their service now. And I don't know if they do it on all their routes or just a few particular routes. But so the new transit center, you've probably heard some talk about that. You might have even seen it on the city TV channel. We're planning on not planning on it, we are building it, a new transit center. I say new, we don't have one now, so I don't know if it's new or if it's just we're getting one. It'd be right there on West Main Street, on the corner of Bridge Avenue and West Main. Right now, Jones Cabinet Shop and it's called the Watson Storage, I think is what's there. It's a big block building. It's been there for a long time. Both of them have been there a long time. Slightly under 3 acres. Right now, as you know, all we have is just a little spot up here on the corner of Burton and Walnut. It's big enough for 6 or 7 buses to get into, and we've got shelters. There's no restrooms, anything like that. So this will be a nice facility. It's going to have restrooms, air-conditioned, heated area, waiting area. You can buy your tickets there if you want to buy them there. And we'll have enough bus stops when we first build it for 12 buses, okay? And we can expand that as we go into the future. But this is really hard to see, and I apologize for that. This is all I had available to me right now because we've kind of been changing it quite a bit. But this is Bridge Avenue right here, and West Main Street, and then Broad Street over here, okay? And the square is up off that way. So Jones Cabinet Shop is right about here, and Watson Storage is right about here, and Jones is over here, okay? This will be the transit center building. Buses will pull in here and pull out here. This is like employee parking and so on over here. There'll be a space out here where RTA can pull in, Greyhound can pull in and pick up and drop off. It'll be gated, so that when we're not in operation, it's secured. We'll have a bus wash facility back here. Right now, we pay a guy to come out there on Florence Road and wash the buses once a month. And he does a fantastic job. I don't know if you've ever seen the buses right after he's washed them, but they really look good. At any rate, these are the 12 spaces. So we got 6 on the inner curb and then 6 more out here.
Will there be room to park the buses there overnight, or do you still?
Yeah, the buses will stay here overnight. In fact, we've got additional parking spaces right along this curb right here where we can stage buses if we need to. Just because there's only 12 actual bus parking spots in here doesn't mean that we're limited to only operating 12 buses. With a transit facility, there's so much more that we'll be able to do that we can't do right now with the service. And I'm really looking forward to it. We'll be able to mix our routes up. You know, right now we purposely come in all at one time, transfer, and go out all at one time, and we do that all day long. And the reason we do that is because we don't have a facility for anybody to wait maybe 5 minutes for the next bus or anything like that. They have to wait out there in those shelters. And it's just not passenger friendly. So as soon as we get this built, you will see some more changes on routes and all that. What those might be, I don't want to speculate right now. But you'll see a better service for sure. Let's go on here. So you'll see on this second bullet right there, most routes will eventually require 60 minutes to make a round trip, and that's true. Right now we every day we have a couple routes that end up getting back to the hub up here a few minutes late. Sometimes that's because of traffic, sometimes it's just because of the ridership that's on the bus, where the people are wanting to get picked up and dropped off, all that kind of stuff. And it all has an effect. We get frequent requests from different agencies in town. Couldn't you just have your bus come down and drop off in front of our facility? Well, it sounds pretty easy because it's only maybe 3 or 4 blocks away, but by the time you do that on some of these locations, where they're at, the traffic light situations, stop lights or stop sign situations, traffic volume and flow in the area, that little 4-block detour could end up taking you an additional 5 to 10 minutes to accomplish. So now what do you got to do? You got a route that's designed around 45 minutes and you just added 5 to 10 minutes onto it. How are you going to make up for that and keep it at 45 minutes? Well, you can't unless you take something away somewhere else. So when we go to 60 minutes, when we do, I don't know when that'll be. Some of the routes may not need a full 60 minutes. So in that instance, we might be able to add something additional to that route, a little further distance in order to keep it combined and working well with all the other routes and so on, the transfers and stuff. And then our highest performing routes, we could use 2 buses, and they would operate hourly, but you would get 30-minute intervals on those by just swapping them up that way. So, but again, you're talking about buying additional buses and $140,000 a piece. That's today's cost. And some of those larger buses, like Clarksville uses some 40-foot Gillig type buses. Gillig is a manufacturer, and a typical transit looking bus. And those things cost anywhere from $350,000 up to $700,000, depending on what you get. And I don't know that we're quite ready to spend that kind of money yet. So that's the kind of bus that I was talking about right there. So yeah. And just like I said there, new vehicles should be larger, heavy-duty buses. We can't make our entire fleet a large, heavy-duty bus. It wouldn't work. So we, for instance, if we ran a route, let's just pick South Church Street. You know, it's a route that just goes straight out and comes straight back. We're not going through any neighborhoods or anything like that. That kind of bus would work okay on that route. Putting one on the Mercury route where we weave in and out some of those city streets when you first leave the hub, wouldn't work too well. Evaluating a fare increase, that's not happening this year, and I don't know that it'll happen next year. We really haven't talked about that. I'd rather see us make some positive changes to the service before we increase the fare, or at least do it in conjunction with each other. Additional fare media options. So we're working with MTA in Nashville on joining in on their new fare system procurement. They have gone through an RFP process, and they've selected 2 companies to provide their new fare equipment, and we're going to get in on that. It's going to cost us probably in the neighborhood of $250,000, but it'll be a real fare collection system as opposed to the little metal box that we have with a hole in it right now on the bus. It'll register things for us. It'll count the money automatically for us. It'll do all kinds of things. You'll be able to use a smartphone if you have one and you want to pay like that. It'll scan your phone. You'll have a magstripe ticket. You may have a regular card that you can use to insert that'll be charged. You know, you can go and say, I want $50 on this card, and you use it until it's dwindled down, and you add more to it. So we're happy about that. It's kind of a slow process again. It involves federal money, and we're hoping that we'll have that in place by this time next year, if not sooner. So one of the things I want to talk about is we don't just get money from the federal government, we get it from the state of Tennessee as well. And all of you may or may not have heard of the Improve Act that Governor Haslam got pushed through, and we were lucky enough to get a good bit of money out of that Improve Act to help build our transit center. So it was a competitive award, which meant we had to fill out an application, provide all kinds of documentation, what we intend to do with the money, what the benefits would be to the community, all of that. We presented that, and they gave us 2 awards, 2 $3 million awards. So $3 million this past year, $3 million next year, and all of that's going to go into that transit facility. When that thing's said and done, it's going to cost about $12 million to build. So it's a lot of money. There's a lot of pavement, a lot of concrete. a lot of building that's got to go up. It's a big ordeal, and but I think it's going to be well worth it.
Would some of that money be used to get Saturday service started right away?
We can't use that money for operational things. It has to be for capital items. The issue wasn't necessarily not having federal or state funds. It was the portion that the city would have to pay out of our pockets to support that Saturday service as well. So, there's...
Council pretty cooperative or what?
Oh yeah, they're cooperative. I don't think anybody just said, "Oh, we're going to cut that out." No, there was a lot of thought put into things, and it was something that I think we all felt was a logical solution. We weren't taking away anything that we already had. We're just delaying putting it into operation for possibly another year. So we're going to push for it and try to get it started this time next year, actually earlier. But there's some more cost associated with operating the service, and what it costs to increase the frequency, adding Saturday service, and so on. That's a good figure that they put in right there, because that's almost exactly what we wound up with for fiscal year 2018. 1.9 million is what it cost us to operate the service. And that's the city share right there. Total cost 1.9, city share. The rest of that was federal and state money. So this is something I wanted to bring up. When you use federal money to operate a bus service, you also have to provide an ADA paratransit service. It's a requirement. We do that through Mid-Cumberland. I don't think it gets the attention that it should. Mid-Cumberland is a really good service if you use it and use it right. For us, under the contract that they have for us, their requirements on-time performance and when they're supposed to pick you up, where they can take you, this and that, are much more stringent than what they do in the rest of their service. They operate in 9 counties, but for us, they just operate in the urbanized area of Murfreesboro. We don't provide paratransit service outside of what we already provide in the fixed route service. So what paratransit service will do, instead of you having to go outside the road and flag them down, they'll come to your place of residence and pick you up. And they'll take you to where you're going. They won't drop you off 4 blocks away to where you have to walk down there to wherever it is you're going. They'll take you there. The only thing is you can't just go and get on it like you do with the fixed route bus. You have to make a reservation. You can make that reservation as close as the day before. And their other service, some of you may have experience with this, because I hear this sometimes. People get frustrated because they've called and Mid-Cumberland says, well, we don't have any vehicle availability to pick you up. It's going to be like 4 or 5 days before we can schedule you for this. That's not in our service. And if you ever call, I want to know about that, because they're not meeting our contract if they're doing that. But you got to make sure that where you're wanting to go is within the Murfreesboro city limits. So wherever you're getting picked up, wherever you're going, has got to be within the Murfreesboro city limits.
Is that for anyone, or?
There's an eligibility process that goes with that. So right now, they are picking up anyone that calls, okay? But that doesn't meet the requirements of the federal funding that we receive. You have to be an eligible rider. So an eligible rider is somebody that has some type of disability. Doesn't matter what it is, it's just some type of disability. And your doctor has to sign off on an application certifying that you have this disability. Again, that doesn't mean that only this young man in a power chair can ride. You know, somebody else in here may have some type of disability or inability to get around easily, and they qualify. To ride the service, it's only $1 more per trip, and you get basically door-to-door service. So I would encourage you to give us a call at that number, the Rover number. You can, I don't know if any of you are familiar with a lady that works in the office named Brenda, but she will work with you on the application process. We've got to get that in motion and get it going and start that soon to where only eligible people ride the service. So we're working diligently to try to get that accomplished. And then if you want to schedule a ride, you have to call Mid-Cumberland directly. So that was my show. Anything else? Well, thank you all for coming. I'll be happy to answer questions anytime. So.